welcome to another episode of Mine Planning Matters, a podcast where we talk about where the industry gets it both right and wrong when it comes to mine planning and mining engineering. This podcast is not just for mine planners, it's for everyone who has anything to do with mine plans, from those who create them, to those who execute them, and all the way up to those who endorse or sign off on them. My name is Mark Bowater, Director and Founder of Australian Mining Consultancy Insignia Mining, and I speak from experience, having been involved in mine planning for over 30 years. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mine Planning Matters. And in this episode, I want to follow on from my most recent one about who owns the plan. And I want to tell a story, and I could have added this on the end of my previous episode, but by then it was getting a little bit long, and I do prefer to keep these short. And so I thought I would actually just make it a follow-on episode with a sort of little short story to reinforce that whole who owns the plan. And about the sort of it being the operations or the production team who own that very short-term plan. So when I worked at an iron ore mine as a grade control superintendent many years ago, and the grade control superintendent sat in the production team, and I had grade controllers, 4 grade controllers, 1 grade controller on each shift, and pit controllers working for me. And in that same mine production department, there was 2 production superintendents, because we had 2 fairly different pits in different geographic locations. And so there was a production superintendent for each of those 2 locations. And we had a number of digging units in each of those locations that were under the control of the production superintendent. And, under the production superintendent, they had production supervisors. And so from an organisational structure point of view, I had grade controllers who were at a level 2. They were effectively the same level as supervisors working for me. And then their peers on shift were 2 production supervisors, 1 at each of the 2 different pits. So these 3 people were all peers, all sat on the same level. None of them reported to each other, and none of them reported to the same superintendent. They all reported to different superintendents. Now, my role as the grade control superintendent, and the grade controller's role, was to create a plan for what we were going to dig each week to build what was called a run, which was a product stockpile, a lump product stockpile and a fines product stockpile. Each of them had 4 qualities, so we had 8 qualities in total that we were targeting. And that was a fairly complex process, trying to plan how you were going to meet 8 quality targets based on the blocks that you had out there of differing grades that you were going to blend together to produce that run. And so that was a fairly complex job for my grade controllers. And so that's what they would spend their shift doing. Now, they would then be directing is maybe not the right word, but they would then be advising the production supervisors where they needed to dig, which block in each blasted area, and often whether, in actual fact, they needed to shut one digger down that was at one face, start up another digger at another face, because of the whole change of grade, and therefore, it was all about trying to meet this blend. And so the grade controller on each shift would be telling the supervisors at the start of the shift, before the shift started, which digging units they needed to run. And then sometimes during the shift, they would be like, no, we can't take any more of that particular block with those grades anymore. We need to swap over to another block. And of course, what happened was that, we had different size digging units, from fully large electric shovels down to front-end loaders, which were mobile and easy to move between any face. And so, it was not uncommon that the grade controller would say to the production supervisor, okay, we need to shut that shovel down, we need to move that fleet of trucks, and we need to take a loader and we need to walk it over to another face, which might be a fair distance away. And so it disturbs the whole production pattern. But from a quality point of view, we need to do that. And of course, the supervisors didn't really like that. They would push back on that because they had KPIs around how many tonnes per shift they were going to get. And every time you had to move a fleet and go from, for example, a shovel down to a front-end loader, which was smaller, then you were going to get less tonnes that shift. And so there was often a lot of pushback and debate between the grade controller and the production supervisor. But the interesting thing was that much as the production supervisors might not want to listen to the grade controller, pretty much basically they did what the grade controller said, because the production supervisor didn't have a really good handle on the qualities and what the run was looking like from a quality perspective, and so therefore couldn't really push back against the grade controllers. And what I found interesting, and at the time, what I disagreed with, but now in hindsight, years later, I see why, was that the production manager, when I spoke with the production manager about who he held accountable for the quality, the final grade of the run that we produced, the production manager said that he held the production supervisors accountable for the quality. And so if we had a bad run and we came out off spec by a bit, it was the production supervisors he would talk to first. And I remember at the time clearly thinking, well, that's completely illogical because it's my people who do all the planning. So therefore it's potentially my people who have produced a bad plan. But, in hindsight now, when I look back, I get why the production manager held the production supervisors accountable for quality. And that is because if he didn't, and if he only held us accountable, and he only held the production supervisors accountable for tonnes that they produced and that's it, then the production supervisors would never listen to the grade controllers because they would just be held accountable for tonnes and that was it. That would be their sole KPI effectively. And so they would just tell the grade controller that no, they weren't going to shut that shovel down and move it over to that front end loader because they were about getting maximum tonnes, and the maximum tonnes would be achieved by continuing to work that shovel. So if the production supervisors weren't held accountable for quality, then they would follow just the sole KPIs that were important to them, and that's it. And so, as I say, many years later, I actually sort of understood that why you had to hold the production supervisors accountable for quality. And I think that's the same, like I say, with our weekly plans, where it has to be handed over from tech services to production and they have to own it, and then they're held accountable for achieving that plan. And if it wasn't a good plan, then they should have had more involvement in the production of that plan in the first place. Thanks for listening to Mine Planning Matters and my thoughts on mine planning. This podcast is for the benefit of the mining industry, and that's you. So I'd love to hear from you through the comments section, and please feel free to let me know any topics you'd like discussed in future episodes. You'll find much more content at our Insignia Mining website, and if you find any of our content valuable, please let your mining colleagues know so they can benefit as well.